peace. There cannot be peace in these times. From Lord Commander Solar Macarius. To start off, this recording summarizes the known historical events of the Milky Way galaxy from human prehistory up through the 41st millennium in the Warhammer 40k setting. Throughout, comparative reference to present dates will be made with respect to the original imperial calendar used before the birth of the Great Rift. This is the time period in which the perspectives of the Imperium of Man and the Eldari are particularly relevant, and it represents the present time. All dates are given in the format 999.M41, which should be read as the year 40,999 AD in the ancient Gregorian calendar. Knowledge of the long ages of human history has been wreathed in shadow, buried beneath the eons, or simply lost over the expanse of time. Some historians continue to seek knowledge, but their work can be compared to holding a candle against the dark abyss. The historians of the Adeptus Administratum seek, gather, and dutifully collect the history of each planet within the Imperium. Once, perhaps, this was done with purpose. Now, however, it is most often an indiscriminate compilation of data. A process where scribes unthinkingly copy content onto scrolls, preserving complete records in constant fear of missing a single, inconsequential letter. The ability, or even desire, to translate what these facts mean in any larger sense is almost entirely absent, found only in a few individuals who are eyed suspiciously, or perhaps punished for their enthusiasm. The largest and most complete collection of such records exists beneath the surface of Terra, where the colossal underholds stretch out of sight. Endless vistas of data scrolls tower upwards like mountains. With flickering candlelight provided by floating servo skulls, processions of curators, scriveners, and ciphers wind through the valleys, attempting to illuminate that which was. Over the years, old truths have been lost to the adjustments and redactions made by revisionists of the Adeptus Ministorum, the Inquisition, and even the High Lords of Terra themselves. I will begin with the known prehistory of the galaxy, beginning with the birth of the Star Gods. The birth of the entities known as the Star Gods occurred at the same time as the moment of creation itself, as they formed from the vast insensate energies first unleashed by that churning mass of cataclysmic force. In that anarchic interweaving of matter and energy, the sea of stars began to swirl into existence, and for an eon, the universe was nothing more than hot hydrogen gas and light elemental dust ruled over by the gravitic force of billions of newborn suns. Long before the first planets had formed and cooled, the very first truly self-aware beings emerged into the universe. Their thoughts encased within the lines of force produced by the plasma and electromagnetic flares of the stars themselves. In later times, these entities would become known as the Catan, but early in their existence, they were nothing like the malevolent beings they would eventually become. They were little more than monstrous energy parasites that suckled upon the solar energies of the stars that had brought them into existence, shortening the lives of otherwise main sequence stars by millions of standard years. In time, these star vampires learned to move on the diaphanous wings of the universe's electromagnetic flux, leaving their birthplaces to drift through the cosmic ether to new stellar feeding grounds and begin their cycle of stellar destruction once more. Beings of pure energy, they paid no mind to the hunks of solid matter they pass in the vacuum of space. The blazing geothermal fires and weak geomagnetic fields of these nascent planets insufficient to be worth feeding even their ravenous hunger. The Old Ones. Just as the stars gave birth to their children, so the planets of the newborn Milky Way galaxy eventually gave birth to life forms composed of matter which began the long evolutionary climb to self-awareness. The first sentient beings of the galaxy known to have developed a civilization technologically advanced enough to cross the stars was a reptilian species of beings later called the Old Ones by the Eldari, who knew them best of all their creations. They possessed a slow, cold-blooded, but still deep wisdom, having long studied the stars and raised astronomy and physics to such a level that their science and technology appear now to humanity like an arcane art. Their understanding of the workings of the universe were such that they could manipulate alternate dimensions and undertake great works of psychic engineering. Their science allowed them to cross the vast gulfs of space with only a single step through the myriad warp gates they built to connect the worlds of the galaxy in a vast network, much like the Eldari webway of today, though on a much larger scale. The Old Ones spread their spawn to many places in the galaxy, but they also knew that all life was precious. Where they passed, they seeded new intelligent species and reshaped thousands of worlds to make them their own according to their predetermined environmental and geographic criteria. It is believed by some in the Adeptus Mechanicus that even Terra felt the Old Ones' touch long before humanity's rise to self-awareness. Though this notion is considered heretical at best by the ecclesiarchy, as the Imperial Creed teaches that mankind was made in the image of the God Emperor before his spirit was incarnated in physical flesh millennia ago. The Old Ones' civilization reached its height in excess of 60 million standard years ago. The Old Ones were responsible for the creation or genetic advancement of most of the currently active intelligent species of the galaxy, including the Eldari, the Krog, the Orc's precursors, the Slan, and the Jokero, though it is unknown if they played any direct role in the evolution of humanity. The Old Ones were potent psychics who routinely used the powers of the warp for a wide variety of technological applications. They constructed a system of instantaneous, faster-than-light portals through warp space that were ultimately adapted to create the Eldari Webway, and was its more advanced precursor. These portals connected all of the old once's colony worlds across vast swaths of interstellar space. The Necrontyr and the Wars of Secession. The humanoid species that would become the Necrons began their existence under a fearsome, scourging star in the far reaches of the galaxy known as the Halo Stars region. Billions of standard years before humanity evolved on Terra. Assailed at every moment by ionizing solar winds and intense radiation storms, the flesh and blood species known as the Necrontyr became a morbid people whose precarious lifespans were riven by constant loss. What little information the Imperium of Man has recovered on the Necrontyr tells that their lives were short and uncertain, their bodies blighted and consumed at an early age by the terrible cancers and other illnesses linked to the high levels of ionizing radiation given off by their sun. Necrontyr's cities were built in anticipation of their inhabitants' early demise, as the living were only brief residents scratching their daily livelihoods in the shadow of the vast sepulchres and tombs of their ancestors. Likewise, their ruling dynasties were founded on the anticipation of demise, and the living were thought of as no more than temporary residents hurrying through the more permanent and lasting structures raised to honor the dead. On the Necrontyr homeworld, the greatest monuments were always built for the dead, never the living. Driven by necessity, the Necrontyr escaped their crucible prison and struck out for the stars, hopeful of carving an empire in which they could realize their species' potential free from the lethal energies of their birth star. Unable to find peace on their own world, the Necrontyr blindly groped outward into the universe to explore other stars, using stasis crypts and slow-moving antimatter-powered torch ships that were clad in the living metal known as necrodermis. To resist the millennia-long journeys through the void, the Necrontyr began to colonize distant worlds. Little by little, the Necrontyr dynasty spread ever further, until much of the ancient Milky Way galaxy answered to their rule. From the earliest days, the rulers of individual Necrontyr dynasties were themselves governed by the Triarch, a council composed of 3 pharaohs. The head of the Triarch was known as the Silent King, for he addressed his subjects only through the other 2 pharaohs who ruled alongside him. Nominally a hereditary position, the uncertain lifespans of the Necrontyr ensured that the title of Silent King nonetheless passed from one royal dynasty to another many times. The final days of the Necrontyr Empire occurred in the reign of Zarek, the last of the Silent Kings. Sometime during their slow expansion, the Necrontyr encountered an ancient species, far older than any other in existence in the known galaxy. Collectively, these beings were known as the Old Ones, and they were absolute masters of forms of energy the Necrontyr could not even conceive of, yet alone wield. The Old Ones had long ago conquered the secrets of immortality, yet they refused to share the gift of eternal life with the Necrontyr, who yet bore the curse of the bitter star they had been born under. The colonization of much of the galaxy by the reptilian mystics had been immeasurably swifter and more expansive than that of the Necrontyr because of their warp gates and mastery of the Imperium. That, and the Old Ones' incredibly long, if not downright immortal lifespans, kindled a burning, jealous rage in the Necrontyr, which ate at their culture spiritually, as much as their physical cancers consumed their bodies. The Necrontyr were astonished to learn that another intelligent species enjoyed such long lives, while their own were cut so brutally short. But as time wore on, further strife came to the Necrontyr. Each dynasty of the Necrontyr sought to claim its own destiny, and soon the great houses were engaged in all-out conflicts known as the Wars of Secession. Had circumstances remained as they were for but a generation more, it is possible that they would have wiped themselves out, as so many species had before them and shall do in the future. As their territory grew ever wider and more diverse, the unity that had made them strong was eroded, and bitter wars were waged as entire realms fought to win independence. Ultimately, the Triarch, the ruling council of the Necrontyr Empire, realized that the only hope of unity lay in conflict with an external enemy. But there were few who could prove a credible threat to the technologically advanced Necrontyr. Only the Old Ones, the first of all the galaxy's known sentient species, were a prospective foe powerful enough to bind the feuding Necrontyr dynasties to a common cause. Such a war was simplicity itself to justify, for the Necrontyr had ever rankled the Old Ones' refusal to share the secrets of eternal life. So did the Triarch declare war on the Old Ones. At the same time, they offered amnesty to any secessionist Necrontyr dynasties who willingly returned to the fold of the Triarch. Thus, lured by the spoils of victory and the promise of immortality, the separatist Necrontyr realms abandoned their wars of secession, and what was later known as the War in Heaven began. It was the last of the Silent Kings who headed the Triarch of the Necrontyr Empire, Jarek, who formulated the plan that would change everything forever and have consequences that would echo through the history of the galaxy for countless millions of Terran years. In a typically bitter act of jealousy and resentment for the Necrontyr race, it was the Silent King who used the Old Ones' refusal to share the secret of immortality as a pretext for war, forcibly uniting the entire Necrontyr species beneath the rule of the Triarch against their common foe. War erupted across the stars, yet while the Silent King succeeded in uniting his hateful people, it was a war the Necrontyr could not win. At least, not on their own.